Today we're starting a new series for Advent. You're here for it, right? Let's do it. We're starting a new series, and we're going to call it Christmas Reveals His Name. There it is coming up. Christmas Reveals His Name. What we want to do this year, leading up all the way to Christmas, is not just look at the Christmas story, which most of us know, the nativity story. And we're going to look at this there, but actually the focus this year will be more not on the story of Christmas, but the meaning of Christmas. You know how we say, like, He is the reason for the season, which is a bit of a cliche Christian thing to say, but what do we actually mean when we say that Jesus is the reason for the season? What is that reason? Why is Christmas such a big deal? Why do we celebrate this every year with that much noise and gifts and food and all of that stuff? Why is that the event that has split how we count history into AD and BC? What's the significance of this thing? And we're going to look at this, and we've called it Christmas Reveals His Name, because what we want to do is we want to look at some Old Testament names of God. So not different gods, same God, but God has more than one name. Do you know that? He has been attributed all kinds of names. Each of those names carry a weight and a significance, something about this is what He's like. And we can see how those names are actually being fulfilled when Jesus was born, in what we call the incarnation, in Him becoming one of us. Some of the Old Testament names and the weight that they carry were fulfilled in Jesus. And we want to look at some of them, not all of them, but some of those names every Sunday to understand, hey, this is why Christmas is so significant. Because this hasn't just started in Bethlehem in a manger. This was already there was a lot of talk a little bit about it in the Old Testament, all leading up to this very moment that changed everything. Okay, so Christmas reveals His name. Today we're going to look at one of those names, but to kick things off, I want to show you on the screen 3 movies posters. Most of you would have seen most of them, I think. Can anybody tell me, can you think of something that these 3 movies actually have in common? It's not the same actor. Something with children. What does that mean? They care for the children. Find a child. Finding something, yeah. All right, I'm going to help you one more time. Who's looking for a child? The father, right, there you go. Today, I didn't think it was going to be this hard, but hey, good. So these things, they all have a heroic father who, as said, kind of goes out of his way, even risks his own life to rescue their child. Guys, this is what Christmas is all about. That the father is going out of his way, risking it all to save his children. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. There's a prophecy in the Old Testament about some of the names of God. This is in the book of Isaiah chapter 9. 700 years before Jesus was born, the prophet Isaiah already had a vision and a prophecy about Jesus' birth and the kind of king he would be. He said there's going to be a baby born, he will be king, and he's the kind of king he's going to be. Let me read this to you, because he's announcing to us that the child in a manger is actually going to be like a heroic father. And much more heroic, with much more desire to rescue than Liam Neeson or Marlon or whoever. But let's read this. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 5 and 6. For a child is born to us, a son is given to us, the government will rest on his shoulders. That means he's going to be the king. And he will be called, now here, it's not just one name, there are 4 names, 4 titles attributed to that king. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, here's the one we're going to look at today, Everlasting Father, and then also Prince of Peace. His government and its peace will never end. He will rule with fairness and justice from the throne of his ancestor David for all eternity. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. So an announcement of a birth. That this Isaiah says a king is going to be born, and he's going to make all things new. And he's saying this king, he has these different titles or these names. Now, we don't connect with this right away, but in ancient times, it was not uncommon that the rulers or the kings, they had titles, names, to describe how they are ruling, what they are like. For example, the Egyptians would say, here is Pharaoh. He is so majestic. He is like a mighty God king. Okay? Or they would say Solomon. He's so wise. He's a wonderful counselor. So Jesus, from Isaiah, he gets a really cool combination. It's not just one title, he gets 4. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Prince of Peace, and also the one we're looking at today, he's going to be an everlasting Father. And this is not about who he is again, but more like what he's like. This describes how he rules, if that makes any sense. Because I can see some of you are looking at me a bit confused because you're saying, hold on, I thought God is the Father, Jesus is the Son. Why is Jesus the Father now? Like, that's really confusing. Now, let's not think of this in terms of Trinity. Like, I believe in the Trinity, but I kind of have a feeling that maybe Isaiah didn't have the full revelation of the Trinity quite yet, because it's Old Testament. This is hinted at in the Old Testament, but much more obviously revealed in the New Testament. So we have a better understanding of what the Trinity is, even though it's still hard for us to understand. But Isaiah, I don't think he's talking about Trinity. What he's talking about is, here's the king, and here's the kind of king he's going to be. This is how he's going to rule. One of his attributes will be, he will be very fatherly in how he rules. He's not going to be a tyrant king. He's not going to be a dictator. He's not going to be power hungry. He's going to be fatherly. He's going to be protective, providing, caring, approachable, paying attention, speaking well of his children in their absence. He's aching and willing to sacrifice for their well-being, even if it costs him everything. That's what a father does. Now, I know when I say father, in the church context, in a room this size, can I address the elephant in the room real quick? Because some of you are triggered even by that word. And you've struggled maybe not just maybe you've struggled for a while already with this whole idea of God is a father, because your own father has not been a good father. And maybe you're feeling it especially now in this season of Christmas, where some of the wounds that you've carried for years, and that maybe in other times of the year you feel like I'm coping, I'm surviving, I'm okay. But at Christmas, it's like the wound just opens up again. And here I am on the 1st of Advent talking about the Father. And I was like, Dave, I would have loved a little bit of a heads up, actually. Or maybe it's not a father wound in the sense of somebody's hurt me, but maybe you've lost your father. Maybe recently or a long time ago, but at this time of the year, that wound is opening up again. And it just feels like it just happened yesterday again. So can we just admit that there's pain in the room? For actually all of us on some level. All of us were fathered by imperfect men. And those of us who are fathers are fathering their children imperfectly. We've been fathered by broken men. But some men more broken than others, which is why some of us have deeper wounds than others. And I feel like it's, before we talk about Jesus being the kind of everlasting Father, why that is a good thing, I feel like we should briefly acknowledge the pain that may be in the room. And I wrote up some types of damaging fathers that are actually quite common. Sadly, it's quite common. And I wrote them up on the screen, and I'll just explain them, and maybe you can relate with one of them. Some of us have had absent fathers. 0 involvement, no responsibility, no support. Some of us have had unfaithful fathers. Well, maybe your father said, I didn't cheat on you, I just cheated on your mom. But he said, no, you cheated on all of us. You walked out on all of us. What you did destroyed everything. Some of us had critical fathers who had high standards, impossible to meet, impossible to please, and it's just been really tough. Some of us have had apathetic fathers who are very, laissez-faire, kind of sloppy, emotionally distant. They are maybe there, but they're not interested. You can tell they're not interested in me. Some of us have had unstable fathers. Some of us had unstable fathers. Maybe someone who is very explosive or short-tempered or violent even, just unpredictable, possibly struggling with an addiction himself, which is why he's out of control. Some of us have had distracted fathers who, in their hearts, they're good fathers, but they're always torn between family and work, for example. They're workaholics. They feel like, oh, I'm needed here, I'm needed there. Or they have a hobby or a group of friends that they just seem to prioritize over family. And it's like they may be even walking around with guilt in their heart because they feel like, I want to be a better dad to them, but somehow I can't manage to set my priorities right. It's a distracted father. And then there's also, surprisingly, damage because of overindulgent fathers. Some of you had overindulgent fathers who have spoiled you and spoiled your siblings because he wanted to be the cool parent, so your mother could be the boring parent. And an overindulgent father is producing kids that go through life very entitled. Now, I don't know if you can spot your dad on the screen right now. Some of you can also say from your own experience, like unhealed, unprocessed father wounds can mess up your entire life. If this is you today, I honor you for not walking out yet. And I want to say two things to you. One is an encouragement, and one is a bit of a warning, actually. The encouragement would be, if you had father wounds, I need you to know that wounds are not chains. And healing is possible. And forgiveness is freedom. And your past is not your identity. And our hope is Jesus Christ. Those were 5 points of a different sermon, but I just gave that to you, okay? So that's the encouragement. It doesn't have to become your story forever. The warning would be this. We have to understand that how we were treated by our fathers, actually on a subconscious level affects deeply how we view everything, God and the world. It just affects us. And so we have to be really careful that we don't project on our heavenly Father the experiences that we've had with our earthly fathers. I can see how that can happen quite easily. For example, if you grew up with a very tough dad, a very demanding dad, then you may project this on God and you're saying, my Father in heaven, he has no compassion. Or if you grew up with a father who was a workaholic and you project this on God, and then you always think, well, God is very busy. He has more important things to focus on. He doesn't have time for me. You're projecting. Or maybe you had a father who was abusive and you project this on God and you're saying, God is out to hurt me. Or maybe you have a father who was unpredictable, impulsive, and you project this on God, and then you constantly feel like, I better behave. I don't want to anger God, because what will happen if I anger him? Here's the thing. Maybe you want to write this down. The everlasting Father is nothing like my earthly father. The everlasting Father is nothing like my earthly fathers. Even if you're kind of like where I am at, I have a really strong relationship with my dad, but even I would have to say, yeah, but the everlasting Father is nothing like my earthly father. Okay? Earthly fathers, whoever they are, they're all imperfect. But the everlasting Father is perfect. And that's what I want to share with you today about the perfection of the everlasting Father. I believe there are 7 surprising gifts that Jesus, the everlasting Father, presents us with that I need you to know about. And whether you ever felt them from your earthly father or not, you get to know these about your heavenly, everlasting Father. So would you write these down? What does it mean for Jesus to be the everlasting Father? That first thing means an unexpected affection. An unexpected affection. There's a story in the Bible where the disciples of Jesus, they watch Jesus pray, and then they come up to Jesus and they say, Jesus, you seem to pray so differently than everybody else we've ever met. Like the priests in the synagogues, they don't pray like you. Teach us how to pray. We want to pray like you. And the first 2 words that Jesus says are the last 2 words that they have expected. Our Father. Our Father? hold on. We didn't think we would have that kind of access to him, this kind of affection that he has for us. This was unexpected for them. In the Old Testament, you really have to look to find something like a verse that would say fatherhood is attributed to God. People weren't praying with that kind of language like we often do now. They were praying, God, you are my protector. God, you are my creator. God, you are my provider. God, you are my fortress. You are my king. You are my shield. All of these things, they're all true. But they wouldn't dare to approach God and say, Abba, Father, Daddy. No, that is unexpected. What does that mean? Jesus is saying, here's how you can talk to God. Call him Father. That is unexpected. That word, that term is a term of love, of security, of familiarity. I can't say that word. Familiarity, it means comfort. You find comfort there. I was, a while back, I was in a hardware store in Berlin. I hate hardware stores. I think a purgatory. It's no fun because I never know what I'm really looking for. And, it's just, anybody enjoys hardware stores? Really, come on. I don't get you people. Really? Wow, okay. So I was there, lost, confused, overwhelmed. So not on my best day. And I didn't know what I was looking for. I was in some aisle looking for something. And there was a kid not too far from me standing. And he didn't look too happy either. Maybe 5, 6 years old. And I was like, I know, bro, I don't know what I'm looking for either. I see why you're just depressed like me. And so I didn't quite get the situation until I heard him make that piercing noise that only 5, 6-year-old kids can make, like, that. And I was like, oh, come on, it's not that bad. And then I realized, oh, maybe it's not about the screwdrivers, or why is he upset? And then I was just slow to get it. And there was another woman who rushed to him, and she asked him, hey, have you lost your daddy? Have you lost your mommy? And he, yeah. And so, sure enough, that's what the situation was. A few moments later, there was the announcement on the speakers. Would the parents of the little boy whose name is please come to the information to be picked up? And I think that's got sorted because a few moments later I turned around the corner and I saw a man with the child. The man was just like this and he had the boy just on his knee on his lap and just held him. And the boy was still crying like, you left me, the whole, and he was just like, I don't know what he said, but he just whispered in his ear. He just whispered in his ear until the boy calmed down. He was fine. Maybe he got an ice cream. I don't know. But he calmed down. There was something so beautiful about that. That's what fathers do. That's the fatherly, an unexpected kind of affection. That's what God is like with us, really. There's a verse in the Old Testament in the book of Zephaniah. Which one? Zephaniah. You can tell it's one of those books we don't read very often because it's one of those obscure minor prophets. At one point, you guys, we're going to be in heaven and Zephaniah is going to be there. And he's going to be like, so did you like my book? And it's like, so that's why at least you can say, I like the verse 3:17. I read that in church. So, but anyways, he describes God this way. I like this translation as well. The Lord your God, he's with you as a hero. He comforts you on aisle 2, when you lost him, like he will save you. And he takes great delight in you. And look at this, he will quiet you with his love. That's what that father was doing. I'll quiet you with I'll comfort you with my love. And he will rejoice over you with singing. And I think many of us can give a testimony and say, it's amazing what you can keep calm through when you know your father is right there with you. It's amazing what you can keep calm through, even a storm, when you know the father is with me. Number 2, unlimited access. Jesus, the everlasting Father, he gives us unlimited access. Unlimited access. Write this down. Maybe you've been at a conference or some kind of thing where there was a larger gathering, had to be organized, and every person involved in the conference got a little wristband. And there were different colors. Maybe if you were an attendee, you got a red color wristband, which means you can go to the main rooms. Maybe if you were helping on the staff, or maybe you had an exhibition or something, you got a blue wristbands, which means you also have access to the breakfast room for the helpers of the conference. Maybe if you were a speaker, you got a green wristband. Did I say green already? No. Did I? No. What did I have? I didn't pay attention. Blue and red. Okay, green for the speakers, which means you can go backstage and talk to the other speakers and whatever. That's great. Maybe if you're the organizer, you get a black wristband, which means you have access to all areas. And there's different kinds of access that you have depending on who you are and how entitled you are to go to these things. Some of you know this. My dad, before he was retired, he did a lot of Christian music in Germany, with choirs and things like this. And there was this event a long time ago in an arena in Nuremberg. And my sister and my mom were also attending this thing where my dad was helping with the music. And they were kind of in the room where all the people were, and my dad was backstage. And my sister, she was 7 at the time, she lost my mom in the crowd. Now this was different than in the hardware store because there were loads of people and she didn't know where mom was. But because she's a logical person, she was like, I'm never going to find mom in the crowd. I'm just going to go backstage to where dad is. And so she went there with no wristband or anything. She just went to, and there were 2 hired security guys guarding the door so nobody just walks backstage. The security people had nothing to do with the event, like who is who. They were just hired people to make sure nobody walks backstage unless they have the right colored wristband. And here comes my 7-year-old sister wanting to go through. And there's like, you can't go through here. But then she says, yes, I can. I'm the daughter of Schnitter. That's my last name. And then they say, okay. That's cool. Now, here's the thing. When Jesus says, I am like a father to you, that means we are like children to him. That means we have that kind of access. When you have God as the everlasting Father, you are a son and daughter of the King. And that opens all the doors for you. There's no more protocol, no more security checks, no more passport control for you to see how close you can get to him. You can go straight to him. In Ephesians chapter 2, it says it this way. It is through Christ that all of us, Jews and Gentiles, are able to come into the presence of the Father. Why? We are members of the family of God. That's good news. Number 3, we also give him undivided attention. Undivided attention, which means he listens when we speak. He sees when we are in trouble. There is, in Matthew chapter 8, there's a story where the disciples of Jesus, some of them were fishermen, they were on a boat and the boat got into a storm. Now, because they were professional fishermen, this wasn't their first storm, and normally they weren't afraid of the waves and the winds. But it must have been quite a severe storm because they thought they were going to capsize and drown. And so they're on the boat, screaming for their mamas, all of that. It's like, oh, this is not going to end well. And what is Jesus doing? Jesus is in the boat with them, in the back of the boat. It's like, oh, I love the waves. And he's sleeping. He's sleeping. Have you ever been in a storm and it felt like Jesus is sleeping? Right? Where you feel like, Jesus, do you not care that I'm drowning over here? Can you not see that I am in trouble? Can you not see I'm drowning in debt? I'm drowning in grief. I'm drowning in my heartbreak. I'm dead worried about my health. I'm dead worried about my kids. I'm dead worried about my future. And all you seem to do is sleep. Am I too real for you today? No, it's just true. Sometimes life feels like that. Here's what Peter, one of the guys who was in the boat that day, what he wrote later in 1 Peter chapter 5. He says, here's what you guys can do. Cast all your cares upon him, for he cares for you. This is just a nice play of words with the word care. There's an invitation here, guys. Some of you, this is all you need to hear today. Cast all your cares upon him, for he cares for you. He's the everlasting Father who cares deeply for you. I looked up the word in the Greek, all, and translated, that means all. I know, you come to Mosaic, you get the deep Bible study stuff. Yes. So, but here's what that means. Nothing's too big, nothing's too small. God cares about your health. God cares about your finances. God cares about your love life. God cares about your career. God cares about your future. God cares about your education. There's nothing too big and nothing too small for him, because he always pays attention to every aspect of your life, and you are never out of his sight. So undivided attention. And number 4, the good thing, that attention is also unending. It is an unending kind of devotion that he has for you. Because the word everlasting doesn't just mean eternal, like, oh, he's always existed, but it also means he's consistent. He is ongoing. God is consistently loving. God is consistently caring. God is consistently dependable. God is consistently generous. In James chapter 1, it says it this way. Look here on the screen. It says, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights. Who, what is he like? He does not change like shifting shadows. Another translation says, in whom there is no inconsistency. Heavenly Father, in whom there is no inconsistency. There's nothing two-faced about him. He's a Father who's always faithful, always dependable, always available, reliable. He's always true. You know, sometimes when I have like pastoral conversations with some of you, sometimes the topic, what I talked about earlier about like father wounds, that comes up in some of our conversations, because that's what some of you are dealing with. And I've noticed that some of the greatest pain that is being carried at Mosaic, some of the greatest pain is because of broken promises of our parents. When our parents break their word, it breaks our hearts. When parents break their words, it breaks our hearts. And maybe you want to write this down. This is also important for those of you who are dads. Inconsistent fathers produce insecure children. Inconsistent fathers produce insecure children. But the everlasting Father, he's different. In Psalm 145, it says, the Lord is trustworthy in all his promises, and he is faithful in all that he does. Jesus is proof of this, because Jesus, from the cradle all the way to the cross, he has proven to us that he is willing to do whatever it takes to keep his promises to us. That's him, okay? You're still with me? Number 5? You there? Yeah? Some of you. Good. I'll keep going with you, and the rest of you, enjoy your sleep. Number 5. Let's see who makes it till the end. Okay, number 5 is unfailing discipline. Oh, I don't like that. Let's go to number 6. Now, hear me out on this. Discipline. Hear me out on this. Jesus wouldn't be a good father if he were not himself invested in the formation and the raising and the preparation of his children. That's what fathers care about, the formation of his kids. That's why he's giving us his fatherly instructions in his word. He's like a coach, like a mentor to us, like, hey, trust my ways. This is how life works. I've been there. I've thought it up, actually, is what he says. Like, this is what you should live like, and you will do well. Yeah. To any father in the room, you know this. Obedience matters to fathers. Not because we want to make life difficult for you, but we want to make life easy for you. Like, follow these ways. This is good for you. Obedience matters to fathers. And God cares enough to confront us about our disobedience. We call that discipline. The word disciple and discipline are actually connected. You cannot be a disciple of Jesus if you don't want to be disciplined by Jesus. Ooh, can I say that? Ooh, let's read some verses from Hebrews chapter 12. It says, Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens. Is that chase? That's, thank you guys. I'm so glad you always sit up front. British people. Chastens, I could look these up before and I forget. But chastens everyone he accepts as his son. Now look at this. Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? He's saying every father disciplines his kids. And if some of you you cringe right now. I was like, no, I don't. That's a bit old-fashioned. This is 21st century Berlin. I don't discipline my kids. And so before you send an email to me, we already know you don't discipline your kids. Okay? Like, we can all tell your kids are undisciplined. I'm joking, but a little bit. God disciplines us to form us. Here's the thing. I think a lot of Christians, we have problems with this because it says here, endure hardship is discipline. Endure hardship is discipline. And we have problems with this because we misunderstand three things. We misunderstand punishment, discipline, and consequences. All of those three feel unpleasant. I don't know anybody who's a fan of these three things. They're all painful and don't like it, but they're very different in what they are. Punishment, discipline, and consequence. Let me try to explain. Punishment, the goal of punishment is retribution. There is a thing of, I need to get even with you. The goal of discipline is not retribution. The goal of discipline is formation. Not retribution, formation. It's an attempt to mold your character, to form you. Punishment is driven by anger. Discipline is driven by love. Punishment looks at the past. It's like, here's what you've done wrong. Discipline looks at the future and says, here's who you can become. They are both uncomfortable, but they're very different in what they are. And then there's also consequences. Consequence is just the logical outcome of sometimes when we make mistakes. So sometimes when you make a mistake, for example, if you cheat on your wife, you've broken her trust. And she says, I don't trust you anymore. That's not her punishing you. That's a consequence of your own action. Or if you're at work, you're just kind of being very, like you're lazy at work and you lose your job because you're lazy at work. That's not a punishment. Well, I've been punished. No, that's a consequence of you being lazy at your work. Okay, so hear me out. This is so important. As Christians, if you are a follower of Jesus, as Christians, from time to time, you will have to face the consequences of your sin. Also, at times, God, because He loves you and He wants to form you, at times He will discipline you. But if you are in Christ, there is no condemnation for you. You will never be punished by God. Consequences, yes. Discipline, yes. But you don't have to fear being punished by God, because the punishment that brought us peace was laid upon Jesus, and by His wounds we are healed, and all that's left for us is grace. Grace, which is the sixth thing, for those of you who are still with me, undeserved grace. Undeserved grace, meaning this everlasting Father, He is full of mercy, He's full of patience, He's full of forgiveness, He is full of favor. And it is undeserved because grace can be deserved. Justice would be deserved. But grace is undeserved. Grace is unfair. It is a gift, actually, that's been given to you. And it's not based on your performance, but on His heart. Just like when me as a dad, those of you who are dads, you know this. My compassion for my children does not depend on how they behave. So on their good days and on their bad days, I love them because I've set my love on them regardless of how they behave. Now, do they annoy me at times? Of course they do. Does that change how I feel about them? No, never. Never. Yeah. In Micah 7, there's another guy who may ask you in heaven, have you read my book? Micah. There's a verse, it says, He delights in gracious love. And another translation, in the Message translation, it actually says, grace is your specialty. It's what you love doing the most. I love that. Grace is your specialty. It's what you love doing the most. Now, some of you had dads and you had to earn their favor. You had to earn forgiveness. You had to earn rewards. But Jesus is different. Don't project your earthly father to the everlasting Father again. Jesus is a fatherly king who grants undeserved favor and kindness. Here's why that matters. Here's why that's good news. Think about this. If salvation were to depend on how well you do, then even the best of us would fail. But since salvation depends on His grace alone, even the worst of us can be saved. Let me say that again. If salvation were to depend on how well we do. Even the best of us would fail. But since it depends on his grace alone, even the worst of us, we can be saved. And that's why in John's Gospel, the Christmas chapter, in John chapter 1, it says, from his fullness we have received grace upon grace upon grace. And that, when you've been on the receiving end of this, produces the last thing in you, which is unspeakable joy. Unspeakable joy. Maybe the most famous father story in the Bible, or one of the most famous ones, is the story of the prodigal son. Most of you will be familiar with it. It's a parable that Jesus told about a son who went up to his father while the father was still alive, and it says, I want my inheritance, but not when you're gone, I want it now. Which basically means, I wish you were dead, but you aren't already. Please, can I have my stuff? And it broke the father's heart. But the father gave him his share of the inheritance, and the son packs up his stuff, leaves the house. For him, he never wanted to return again. He never wanted to see his father again and his family. And he just took off to a faraway land, spends it all. But then there was a famine in the land. And the boy finds himself in a kind of a pig's house, and he's starving. And he's coming to his senses, he says. And it says that he says, oh man, I remember at my dad's farm, even the day workers, the hirelings, they had it better off than I do. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to my dad's house, not asking if I can be a son again. There's no chance that will ever happen. But maybe he will take me on as a hireling, because I'll be better off there than here. And so he returns home, and there's this amazing verse in Luke chapter 15, where it says, while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, which tells me he was waiting. He was on the porch looking for him every day. Maybe today is the day my son may return home, even though he said, I'll never see you again in your lifetime. He saw him and he felt compassion and he ran. Fathers in that country don't run in the ancient cultures. You know, patriarchs don't run. But he ran and he embraced him and he kissed him. And then a few verses later it says, and they began to celebrate. Another translation, they began to rejoice together. That is one of the most beautiful descriptions of gospel joy, of unspeakable joy. The reason why I have an emotional connection with this is because, again, I told you my dad did music, Christian music. And one of the things he did is he wrote these Christian musicals, like stage theater, choir, orchestra, the whole thing. And not as professional as you might think, but it was a good attempt. No, he did well. He was good. But one of the pieces that he wrote was on this story, on the prodigal son. And I remember, this was in the 80s, okay? So I was 5, 6 years old at the time. And when they like toured a little bit throughout Germany, and when they were near our home, then my mom would take me and my 2 brothers to see one of the concerts, and we would be sitting in the first row like, go Dad, yeah, you know, like cheering him on. But I remember me and my brother sitting in the first row, and you know, like I didn't understand all of the stuff that was going on in the play. I was a kid, I didn't understand everything, but I remember feeling the emotions like it was yesterday. You know, that's the thing about kids. They may not understand everything cognitively, but they can feel. They can feel all the stuff you and I are feeling as well. And I remember feeling the heartbreak of the father who was waiting for his son to return. I remember feeling the desperation of the son when he was in the pig house and feeling so lost. And it was cool because they had smoke machines, and I've never seen this before in my life. Like, oh yeah, like I felt it, you know. But by far the emotion I still remember the most is the emotion of when they were united again. Because there was this very joyful song that they were singing in that moment, and after all the kind of this dark emotions and the heaviness of it all, there really was a sense of joy. There was a sense of relief. It's like they're together again. A kid can understand this. They're together again. This was never meant to be broken. They're together again. And I would say, honestly, guys, in my life, because of this experience of this music of my dad, I can say I felt the gospel far earlier than I understood the gospel. Some of you have maybe said the same thing about, maybe you had an emotional connection with this even though you didn't quite understand it yet. Like I felt that. There's a verse in the book of Psalms where it says, my heart rejoices in your salvation. That's what that closing song was like. So let me read you the lyrics of that song when they were reunited. The Father, he runs to meet us. Through Jesus, he is drawing near. Nail-pierced hands reaching out to hold us, sheltering us with his peace. Guys, that's Christmas. Right? That's why we celebrate. That is the joy of our salvation. That is why we rejoice. And I know you're like, oh, good for you, Dave. I have a gift for you today. I found a video of this from the 80s of that. Yeah, I want to show it to you because I thought I might as well. I'll show you a minute of it because even the hairstyles of the people that will bring joy to your heart. So watch this on the screen. Here you go.
Der Vater kommt uns entgegen, in Jesus kommt auf uns zu. Legt seine durchbohrten Hände, trägt und segnet auf uns. Wenn wir Schuld beim Namen nennen, dann kommt uns entgegen. Das Versagen ihm bekennen, dann kommt uns entgegen. Der Vater kommt uns entgegen, in Jesus kommt auf uns zu. Legt seine durchbohrten Hände, trägt und segnet auf uns. Der Vater kommt uns entgegen, in Jesus kommt auf uns zu. Legt seine durchbohrten Hände, trägt und segnet auf uns.
Here's how he says this. Jesus, he came to his own people, but they rejected him. But to all who believed in him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. I want you this question. Do you know him as Father? Do you know him? Do you know him that close, that personal? Have you, when I shared these 7 gifts of the Father, can you connect with them? Have you experienced them? Or maybe have you left them still unopened under the Christmas tree? Or maybe you're among those who feel like, no, I'm actually rejecting all of this. I don't want nothing to do with this. Jesus came so that he can extend his love to you, his unexpected affection. Jesus came to give you unlimited access to himself. Jesus came so that you can experience his undivided attention and his unlimited devotion. He came to shape you with unfailing discipline. He came to shower you with undeserved grace and to welcome you with unspeakable joy. And you say like, okay, how do I experience this? How do I become a child of God then? How do I do that? What do I have to do to become a child of God? The answer is in this verse I just read, John chapter 1. You don't have to do anything. All you have to do is trust and believe. Believe in him. To all who believed in him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. And then the heavenly courtroom is no longer a criminal court, but it's an adoption ceremony. And you're a son, you're a daughter of the King. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Let's just close our eyes for a moment. And if you say like, okay, I still don't get everything, but as much as I understand now, I want to have Jesus as my everlasting Father. Maybe he's the only father you'll ever have, because your earthly father wasn't a father to you. But Jesus is offering fatherhood to you today with these 7 gifts. And if this is you, I invite you to just welcome him into your life right now. And maybe for the first time, you can just do that by praying a prayer. You can pray it in your heart. You don't even have to say it out loud. God sees your heart. God knows your heart. I'm just going to pray it. I'm going to pray a prayer. And if it's your prayer, you can just, again, repeat it in your heart for yourself. Maybe you want to say something like this. Jesus, thank you for being my everlasting Father. Have you ever told him this? Thank you for being my everlasting Father. Jesus, there are father wounds in my life that seem impossible to heal. And I admit that I've often projected my earthly father to you. And that's why I really struggled with the idea of you being a father in my life. But I'm starting to understand now that you are so different, so much better, so much more glorious, so much kinder than any earthly father can ever be. And I'm curious about those 7 gifts that you offer. I long to experience them in my life. So as much as I know how and as much as I understand it now, I want to say, Jesus, come be the Father in my life. I welcome you into my heart, into my life. And when you come, little heads up, you may find things in there that maybe I've done wrong, or they were done in a way that isn't pleasing to you. I ask you for your forgiveness for the things that I've done that hurt out my relationship to you and maybe hurt other people, hurt myself. Please heal me of these things. And then shape me, mold me, and make me a son, a daughter of the King. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.